Hello everybody and welcome to my channel. My name's Helen and I talk about all things journaling, art and creativity. Today I'm going to be talking about how to make stunning abstract art using post-it notes, pretty much solely post-it notes. As you'll see at the end, I do actually use some white paper and a black marker as well, but that's all I've used in this particular composition. And sometimes it's astounding, isn't it, how the most simple things can be the most effective. I started by getting some post-its in various colours and doodling on them and chopping them up to create collage fodder. The reason that this struck me as a good idea for an art composition is that post-it notes often come in complementary colours. So the hard thing of choosing your colour palette is already done for you. And then it's just a matter of cutting and drawing into the post-it notes in order to make interesting fodder. Now, I made this a very mindful activity. I didn't overthink it. I was very intuitive and I was completely at peace with the fact that I may not use some of these pieces in my composition today. I was just doodling and allowing myself to kind of get taken away in the moment, in the process, and just put pen to paper. Nothing more complicated than that. As you'll see at the end, some of these things weren't used in today's composition, and they will be kept for another day when I've no doubt they will come in handy in some other abstract composition. You'll notice as I'm cutting these pieces up, I am also keeping the negative shapes, i.e. the things that are kind of around the shapes that I'm cutting out, because those two can be used in abstract compositions. My aim was to create a variety of shapes in different colours and essentially then have a go at arranging them in a pleasing way on a background. For the background, I did use a piece of black cardstock, which I stuck into my scrappy journal. One thing that I have learnt in the time that I've been doing abstract art is that value, i.e. how light or dark, or should I say how bright or dark the colours are, makes a big difference to how the overall piece ends up looking. Which is why I decided to immediately introduce black into the mix by using it as a background. As you can see, I've also decided to use a black pen in order to create more contrast on the pieces of fodder that I'm creating. I started out with a thin fine liner pen, but I soon realised that I preferred a thicker Sharpie pen to make my marks. Some of the fine liner pen pieces do get used, but most of the pieces that I ended up using were the Sharpie marker. This is just an example of how if you go through a process and you trust the process, you will learn things about what you particularly want to do in your art as you go. You don't have to start out knowing the whole story. You don't have to start out knowing exactly what kind of shapes you want to make or with what materials. You can just start working and see what feels right to you. As the fodder making continues, you'll notice that there are certain motifs that I start to gravitate towards. And this is because those are the ones that are most pleasing to my eye as I make them on the page. And I only found that out by just having a go and making some marks and seeing which ones I liked best. I was particularly enamoured with making the lines of black dots on the background that I particularly liked. I ended up also enjoying drawing what essentially amount to mini rainbows. Splitting the post-it note into a sort of grid also appealed to me, as did drawing noughts and crosses on different post-it notes. I didn't know this when I started out, that these are the things that would appeal to me. I just started making marks and this is where I ended up. I do use most of the lacer shapes in my composition. The ones that I kept going back to over and over again, those are the ones that when I was putting my composition together, I gravitated towards those and they make up the bulk of the final composition. So do trust your instincts. If you notice that something's very pleasing to you, then try doing it again and see if it's still as pleasing. And again, and practice making those marks that you enjoy making so much. In doing so, you are likely to find signature shapes and colours that speak to you as an artist that you will then go on to use in countless future compositions. For those of you who have trouble trusting your instincts, I just want you to know that you are not alone. I went many years being too afraid to do art because I was essentially told as a child that I couldn't do it. And it took me a very long time to get over those feelings of inadequacy and just have a go and create something and not worry too much about what the outcome was. Just take pleasure in creating art and being mindful as I create art and enjoying the feel of the pen against the paper. So if you're finding that same level of intimidation that I once did, please just pick up any pen. A post-it note is not expensive. It doesn't matter if you ruin it in inverted commas, though I'm sure you won't. There is no real ruining things in art. Whatever you break, you can fix, I've learned. But it took me a long time to learn anything in art because I was just so scared of putting the pen to paper. I was told that I couldn't do art, there was no point, and it wouldn't earn me any money. I might as well just go and get a day job. And those words stuck with me for many, many years. I suspect many people in my generation were told something similar. So here is where I start the composition on the black piece of card, which I have stuck into my scrappy art journal. There is a link below to how I made this scrappy art journal, if it's something that appeals to you and you'd like to make your own. But right now I'm just looking at the page and trying to create some balance in the composition. So you'll notice that I put blue at one side, blue at the other, dots on one side, dots on the other. And my camera was really annoying me at this point because it kept going in and out of focus, and I did decide to move it eventually, so it will stay in focus shortly if you just bear with me. But I don't know why that particular angle, it just did not like it at all. Anyway, we're in a better position now. And as I see, I continue to create balance on the page. Circle on one side, circle on the other. Now, I don't always match the shape on one side with the shape on the other. Sometimes I do same colour but two different shapes, or sometimes I do the same shape but two different colours. But I am trying to create some form of symmetry on both sides of the page so that it ends up looking like everything is where it's meant to be. This is just how I work, and there are absolutely no rules when it comes to creating abstract art, or indeed, frankly, any kind of art really, save for perhaps the rules of perspective if you're creating something that's fine art. But other than that, I would say the rules can be broken, and even the rule of perspective can be broken. You can invert everything and make everything that's supposed to be big, small, and everything that's supposed to be small, big, and you end up with a very, very interesting illustration. So yes, even the rules of perspective can be broken to really wonderful effect. Now, to start off with in this composition, I was using what I would say were fairly regular shapes. Rectangles, circles, arches, shapes that appear naturally in the world of geometry. And it took me quite some time through this composition to recognise that actually the most interesting parts of my composition were when I interrupted those regular shapes with irregular shapes. Now, this is, of course, something that I'm sort of aware of, that in abstract design, it is useful to have both regular and irregular shapes, to have a range of colours and, shall we say, shades of colour. I'm aware that if I use printed text, it's also good to have something handwritten to contrast against it. So I am aware of the kind of theory of contrast and how it might add to a piece. But it really started with me putting that blue piece down on a diagonal angle. When I did that, I liked the way it interrupted the horizontal and vertical manner of all the other shapes. And then that started to get me thinking about how else I could interrupt the pattern that I had started on this black piece of paper. I hope you'll agree with me that the post-it notes look great against this black background. They do naturally pop against the black background, and just adding a bit of white paper for some more value contrasts was all I needed besides the post-it note. But as is evident from this video, I do go some way through the composition, almost to the point where I'm wondering, oh, should I add anything else? Before I then start to think about how to interrupt the pattern that I've created. It starts with this little pink piece of paper here, and I think, oh, maybe I could use that to interrupt this very regular shape I've got going on. And then I pull some more of the pink irregular shapes out and decide quite quickly that it's a bit too much pink for the page and that I didn't really want a massive imbalance of one colour. I am going to play with that in a different composition. I think it would be interesting to see if one dominant colour does make a composition more interesting or if it makes it more boring. And that's something that I'm not sure about, and maybe it depends on the colour. So from using all these different pink pieces and not really finding a place for them, I found this yellow piece and interrupted the pattern and decided that I would use one pink piece and one yellow piece, and I would try and disrupt the other shapes and the negative space around the other shapes as much as possible with those two pieces. And then as you start to see, I start to cut strange shapes out of the regular patterns I'd created. I do end up using this green piece, but it takes me a little while to find a place for it, so I cut another piece. And this just shows the experimentation that I went through. For those of you who feel like you never quite get a piece of paper down in the right place on a first attempt, well, you can see here that I'm trying lots of different things, auditioning the pieces of paper in lots of places before finally gluing it down. I must admit that I was relieved when I had this little revelation about the irregular shapes and how they were going to actually drive me towards a completed piece of work, or certainly a completed piece of work for today, shall we say. There's nothing to say that I can't go back to this piece at a later day and add to it. That is the beauty of art, and it is my prerogative, and it is my art journal. But I recently made a video about the different stages that we go through in an art journal piece, and one of them is discovery. And it is amazing to me how every single time I come to my little art journal, scrappy as it may be, I do discover something about art and about what I feel makes art that speaks to me and, how I want to create. So this whole revelation about interrupting the negative space, I was grateful for that revelation, and it's something that I will take forward into my other compositions in the future. I decided to finish up on a much closer angle so that you could see clearly what kind of piece I was creating and moving towards, how I was getting bolder and bolder in where I was putting all these very strange shapes that did not fit the usual geometric design from the beginning. Now, I hesitate to say that this piece is finished. I may go and add more layers to it, but I think for today I am happy with it as a piece of abstract art, and I used it only making post-it notes, which is to me astounding, staggering. It was made from such simple materials, and yet of all the art pieces I've made, it's one of the ones I am most proud of. I will have to rub off a bit of the extra glue that's sitting around on it once it's dry, but once that's been rubbed away, it will be nice and clean. Are you going to have a go at this? I really hope so. Let me know what you think about it in the comments. There'll be another video soon. Until then, take care, and I'll see you next time.